So, hello everyone. I'm Patrick Lingwood. I'm the active travel lead at Oxfordshire County Council. And I'm responsible for basically walking and cycling infrastructure. I'm going to be talking about 20-minute neighbourhoods in terms of how Oxfordshire local priorities and the challenges. And although I represent the council, I don't necessarily everything I say will be what council views, but who knows. So earlier this year, we had Oxford hit the kind of newspaper fame with this protest within in the centre of Oxford, and I'll come back to this. But in a way, partly I want to during the kind of talk, I want to explain, said go back to why this happened. But at the moment, just look, no 15-minute neighbourhoods, which kind of you think about is quite surprising, really, because it's in some ways it's an obscure planning idea, which you'd have thought was completely kind of all beneficial. And this is a diagram. And if you, let's say, take it from, let's say, 11 o'clock, you know, this, well, first we'll take it from home, based on home. So you've got this, and everything's within 15 minutes. So eat healthy. You want to be able to cycle to school. You're able to walk to work in 15 minutes. And I mean, that'd be nice. And, you know, can engage in community activities. You're going to stock up on your food. You can enjoy nature, and you can get involved in community involvement and take care of your health and all those kind of things we've already said. We know there's evidence, basically, it's all good for you. And then active travel, which is also very, very good for you. But if you look at it, this kind of this image, which is kind of what the image of the 15-minute neighbourhood is, there are lots of people walking, a few people cycling, but there's something missing in this kind of picture, which is the car. Not a single car in this whole image. So in a way, kind of that's the first question. Why are there, what is this? And the council itself has policies which are not quite such romantic images, but it has the same requirements of having access. And the council's 20-minute, they make quite clear in the is 10 minutes there and 10 minutes back. So it's actually asking for, you could say, a 10-minute access neighbourhood. And it has policies to work with the district and city councils to apply this, and even kind of looks at it in terms of rural areas. So so that's what the council policy is. So it's in its local transport connectivity plan. So in a way, beyond the hype or the policy, does it work? Well, in some ways, let's taking Oxford, it actually could be an exemplar. Oxford, and this is my plan of Oxford, and the kind of darkish blue circle is the city centre. The orange circle is the train station, and these kind of circles are basically 15-minute walk radii to those kind of centres. Those, but it has basically four very quite thriving local shopping centres, as well as two ones which are slightly smaller. And so if you look at that, basically a lot of Oxford is actually covered by these shopping centres, and they are shopping centres with kind of quite a range of facilities. Including comparison shopping. So in many ways, we should be doing okay, particularly in Oxford. And somebody independently undertook a accessible walkability, which is basically a 20-minute accessibility, based on the kind of what they typically do is the number of services which were they could get to within the, I can't remember what they did do anyway, but levels of walking to. And as you can see, if you remember what was before, it kind of very much mirrors where those local shopping centres are, and with Oxford City Centre. In the same way as I think the area of saying the previous one, City Centre doesn't come as dark blue as some of the other areas, was once again, there wasn't quite such good access to greenery in the City Centre with some other kind of facilities. So that's also all looks very good. We actually also know quite a lot about these shops. Admittedly, this data is getting a bit out of date, but kind of they, if you take all those four local shopping areas themselves, I mean, about 50% of all trips to them are foot, 10% by cycle, 10% more by car, 10% by bus. In the second chart, I'm looking at one shopping centre in particular. We can see that there's a strong correlation between access and the mode that people get in there. So, which is kind of at your basis in terms of that 15-minute city idea. So we're under 5 minutes, which is the first bar. Over 80% were arriving on foot, and the other was all the others by bicycle. And the next one, the 5 to 10 minutes, it's down to 60% on foot and about 20 or so percent on cycle. And even at the 10 to 20 minutes, it's still 50% arriving on foot, 20% bicycle. And then beyond that, it's primarily car with significant bicycle. However, and this is where I'm going to start with all the buts and however's, even in that survey, 60% of shoppers in those local centres did their main shop in a superstore and mainly by car. This leads to some of the weaknesses of the. Then I hit something wrong. What they do? So, what they do? I must have hit it wrong. Oh, shit, what I did. There you go. Right. I think the first thing is most travel in an urban area. I mean, in a self-contained urban area like Oxford, is going to be local. I mean, but local, but it's also going to be citywide. So there's a whole, at least by the residents. So I think one of the first things, if we're talking about accessibility, and this is within the active travel strategy, we actually had another popular view. This is in the policy concept. It's the 20-minute plan based on a 20-minute cycle ride, where a wider range of facilities is within the 20-minute cycle ride. So, and if you look at that, you can see the quite significant difference between the walking accessibility and the cycling accessibility, which actually would include basically the whole town to give a whole range of facilities you could access. And that's one of the actual questions in these. Is it just the one, or is it do you need to have a range of facilities? Because people don't sometimes want different facilities. And just to emphasise that again, the dark grey areas are the extent of that going from the 5 to 15-minute accessibility by foot, whereas the lighter grey areas is the same by cycling, and even the 5-minute is further than the 15-minute on foot. Cycling is a much faster means of transport. And then that comes into kind of economic viability, which is all services depend upon the customers, the number of customers, unless they're completely subsidised. And I'm not an expert on this, but on the left-hand side, I kind of looked at some of the kind of in research, how many people are necessary to kind of maintain the first lot you could do by walking, but then you start going the second one, larger secondary schools, libraries, you're beyond a walking it's beyond the walking distance. So I think in a way, thinking beyond, we live in a very low cycling country, so we can't think of beyond walking generally, but if you think in terms of cycling, you begin to open up this idea. And I will say that Utrecht, which I've just been visited, has a 10-minute cycling city policy, which they're doing very well. I think about 95% of people are within that 10% cycling accessibility. This piece of research, which I just looked at, to kind of says to achieve this 15-minute time, are they? I mean, the question is, are they actually deliverable? In reality, are they deliverable? And the kind of the measures at the bottom there, where it says means available for achieving them, we really have very, very, very little impact. We don't have any ways of actually really impacting this, particularly in an existing urban area. And even in a new urban area, if anyone has dealt with planning, will know the very big challenges. So unless one is actually creating a new city, a new urban area, like one part like the island of Groningen with 100,000 people, it's unlikely to have these opportunities of changing density, improving accessibility, doing kind of major zoning, etc. And I think there's another weakness about the 20 minutes or 50 minutes, whichever one you're good, is that it may be necessary to have the facilities nearby to go by foot, but it is not sufficient to ensure that everyone will go by foot. Basically, people have choices, and they make those choices, not always to go on foot. So that comes to what are we doing? In a sense, what we're attempting is if we look on this really fundamentally, we're trying to differentially alter the travel environment to change the attractiveness of modes And this is the council has a very specific, this is for Oxford, very ambitious schemes. And these are things which the council does have levers, which we can change things. So first, like cycle neighbourhoods, we can improve cycle routes, like on road and off road. In terms of parking control, we have all manners of powers in terms of parking. We can put barrier lines to prevent it. We can charge for it. We can reduce controlled parking zones to control urban area. And going back to that one in the corner, we can even control outside the public space in terms of workplace levelling, which we're intending to do. Then we can improve zero emission zones, improve the quality of vehicles in terms of the pollution they're doing. We can interact on the speed, which alters the kind of environment. And very fundamentally, which is getting on to the next theme, we can introduce filters to differentially kind of restrict the modes, either by in this case, central bus gates, or by the low traffic neighbourhoods, which are up the other corner. So that we have all manners of powers in that way. And just to give an example, in a way, this kind of thinking about access and this gives a different this gives what we're differentially between car and the active travel. So on the left, we have Oxford city centre, how it looks for a cyclist or a pedestrian in terms of the through routes you can use. And there's an immense number of those. And then that brown, we're actually intending to improve at the moment you can't cycle to the city centre during shopping hours, and we're going to look at that and see if we can actually improve allow cycling to actually improve the cycling accessory. On the right hand side, we have the existing accessibility for cars. We've already closed High Street in 1999, so there's a big gap at that. But we are intending to do 3 more filters, which basically will take the whole of the city centre out of the kind of the car routes. I mean, there will be exemptions, so it's not 100%, but that will be they are available on our website. And equally, the other in terms of neighbourhoods, it's low traffic neighbourhoods and applied the same principle, and that was actually once again it's included in our active travel strategy. But that's the neighbourhood concept fits in with the your goals of the low traffic neighbourhoods LTNs, which minimise traffic to the neighbourhood. In terms of what LTNs do is once again reduce the convenience of the car for local trips in the city, and improve the attractiveness of walking inside and cycling inside and between LTNs, which is important, particularly when you start thinking about one of those images of children like cycling to school. Parents and children are very sensitive to the kind of levels of traffic, and these LTNs, in a sense, have created those areas are really not traffic free, but almost traffic, really low traffic. And if you think about the impact on car driver choice, car drivers have now kept those red lines, which are the major roads. So whereas before they could have filtered through any of those brown, blue, or even green lines, or particularly there's a purple line which shows them, their time has been increased. Whereas in some ways, the walking and cycling the attractiveness has been increased, even without any moving anything. This comes to a kind of an interesting controversy here. Before putting the LTNs in, we had a survey where we asked the residents in the area to be affected what their priorities for their streets are. So we can ask them many things. Do you want to have children where to play? Do you want greenery? Do you want seats? And we also asked whether they supported at that point the future LTNs. There was one priority where the support for the LTN split into 2 groups very, very significantly. And it was this one, which was the priority, keeping local roads open so car trips are easy and convenient, which is for an individual benefit. And those who supported the LTNs, only 7% thought that was very important, and nearly 50% said there's no benefit of that. Whereas the group who didn't support the LTNs, it was the biggest, the most important priority they had above all the other priorities, even though they supported some of the other priorities. So it really opens up that we are actually taking away what is kind of perceived as basically a real benefit for a group of the population. And that really begins to explain why we've got these themes, because in Oxford, a 15-minute neighbourhood isn't a nice kind of nice to have always everything's nearby, and it's actually kind of coupled with restrictions to car use in order to improve the access to these facilities. At the same time, it's combined with low traffic neighbourhoods, and I think that right, you could say, in the text, in a free country, you ought to be able to get in a car and drive wherever you like. But that freedom is already starting to feel like a distant memory. So that's kind of, I think, the protests behind this. There were a lot of, let's say, influences from outside Oxford, but there is a core of people who are being, let's say, quite inconvenienced. And in a way, this kind of comes to a interesting question for the council, because it is our duty to look after the interests and rights of our population. And there have been many surveys, well, I mean, in Oxford and as well elsewhere, in terms of do people support LTNs, do they not support LTNs? Well, in a way, you could always say, oh, this is not representative, and it is representative. We had a kind of a natural experiment in May at the point when the LTNs were, well, they still are, but they were still really high on, it was kind of the major issue, let's say, in that election. And for each of these wards, a candidate stood specifically on an anti-LTN ticket, and the other three parties, in this case Labour, Green, Lib Dem, were pro-LTNs to a greater or less extent. So if you were against LTNs, you would have voted. And in a sense, it shows there are kind of quite a significant percentage of people who are, opposed to this way of, but on the other hand, the other is definitely in the majority. In fact, of all the candidates, only one in Temple Cowley was elected, but he was already elected. He was already an independent, so there's kind of other factors playing on that upset support in there. So in summary, I think the 20-minute, 15-20-minute neighbourhood cities represents a kind of a nicest aspiration of an ideal urban form. But first of all, I think we need to think the level of city accessibility. So basically, we need to include cycling in this idea. The county council, and also really the city council as well, have very few effective levers on provision, planning and location of services. But we do have many powers over highways, including speed limits, parking and access restrictions. And we can use those effectively to move towards a sustainable, accessible urban environment within the existing urban framework, without necessarily increasing the density of the neighbourhood. But because these measures of using traffic controls are actually, I think, more effective than equipment cities, they do make manifest, or whatever her phrase would is, they strongly feel held priorities on which rights individuals can choose according to their own preferences. Now, if you think it's the most important is to be able to drive, if that right is being taken away. So I think that's the reason why this kind of what should seem like a benign concept has become quite critical and quite controversial. Anyway, thank you. And